Good evening, beautiful souls, and welcome to part 2 of The Adventures of Pinocchio. So find yourself arriving here, now, in the present moment, in your bed, knowing that there is nothing more for you to do today other than rest. And take a big, big stretch, reaching your arms up overhead. Feel the delicious stretch in your muscles. Spread out your legs. Point and flex your toes. Give your calves some love. And when you're ready, just bringing yourself into the present moment, paying attention to the sounds that you can hear around you. The sensations on your skin, your pajamas, the mattress beneath you, the duvet or blanket on top of you. And notice anything that you can smell, anything that you can taste. Maybe you've just brushed your teeth. And if your eyes are still open, noticing what you can see, where you are, and arriving here completely. And when you're ready, if it's comfortable to do so, closing down the eyes, noticing now how your breath is becoming deeper, naturally from relaxing. And we will continue our journey tonight with Pinocchio, the little rascal that he is. Chapter 6. Pinocchio falls asleep with his feet on a foot warmer and awakens the next day with his feet all burned off. Pinocchio hated the dark street, but he was so hungry that, in spite of it, he ran out of the house. The night was pitch black. It thundered, and bright flashes of lightning now and again shot across the sky, turning it into a sea of fire. An angry wind blew cold and raised dense clouds of dust, while the trees shook and moaned in a weird way. Pinocchio was greatly afraid of thunder and lightning, but the hunger he felt was far greater than his fear. In a dozen leaps and bounds, he came to the village, tired out, puffing like a whale, and with tongue hanging out his mouth. The whole village was dark and deserted. The stores were closed, the doors, the windows. In the streets, not even a dog could be seen. It seemed the village of the dead. Pinocchio, in desperation, ran up to a doorway, threw himself upon the bell, and pulled it wildly, saying to himself, "Someone will surely answer that." He was right. An old man in a nightcap opened the window and looked out. He called down angrily, "What do you want at this hour of night?" "Will you be good enough to give me a bit of bread? I am hungry." "Wait a minute and I'll come right back," answered the old fellow, thinking he had to deal with one of those boys who love to roam around at night, ringing people's bells while they are peacefully asleep. After a minute or two, the same voice cried, "Get under the window and hold out your hat." Pinocchio had no hat, but he managed to get under the window just in time to feel a shower of ice-cold water pour down on his poor wooden head, his shoulders, and over his whole body. He returned home as wet as a rag and tired out from weariness and hunger. As he no longer had any strength left with which to stand, he sat down on a little stool and put his 2 feet on the stove to dry them. There he fell asleep. While he slept, his wooden feet began to burn. Slowly, very slowly, they blackened and turned to ash. Pinocchio snored away happily, as if his feet were not his own. At dawn he opened his eyes just as a loud knocking sounded at the door. "Who is it?" he called, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "It is I," answered a voice. It was the voice of Geppetto. Chapter 7. Geppetto returns home and gives his own breakfast to the marionette. Poor Pinocchio, who was still half asleep, had not yet found out that his 2 feet were burned and gone. As soon as he heard his father's voice, he jumped up from his seat to open the door. But as he did so, he staggered and fell headlong to the floor. In falling, he made as much noise as a sack of wood falling from the 5th story of a house. "Open the door for me," Geppetto shouted from the street. "Father, dear father, I can't," answered Pinocchio in despair, crying and rolling on the floor. "Why can't you?" "Because someone has eaten my feet." "And who has eaten them?" "The cat," answered Pinocchio, seeing that little animal busily playing with some shavings in the corner of the room. "Open, I say," repeated Geppetto, "or I'll give you a sound whipping when I get in." "Father, believe me, I can't stand up." Oh dear, I shall have to walk on knees all of my life." Geppetto, thinking that all these tears and cries were only other pranks of the marionette, climbed up the side of the house and went in through the window. At first he was angry, but on seeing Pinocchio stretched out on the floor and really without feet, he felt very sad and sorrowful. Picking him up from the floor, he fondled and caressed him, talking to him while the tears ran down his cheeks. "My little Pinocchio, my dear little Pinocchio, how did you burn your feet?" "I don't know, father, but believe me, the night has been a terrible one, and I shall remember it as long as I live. The thunder was so noisy and the lightning so bright, and I was hungry, and then the talking cricket said to me, 'You deserve it, you were bad.' And I said to him, 'Careful, cricket.' And he said to me, 'You are a marionette, and you have a wooden head.' And I threw the hammer at him and killed him. It was his own fault, for I didn't want to kill him. And I put the pan on the coals, but the chick flew away and said, 'I'll see you again. Remember me to the family.' And my hunger grew, and I went out, and the old man with a nightcap looked out of the window and threw water on me. And I came home and put my feet on the stove to dry them, because I was still hungry. And I fell asleep, and now my feet are gone, but my hunger isn't. Oh." And poor Pinocchio began to cry so loudly that he could be heard for miles around. Geppetto, who had understood nothing of all that jumbled talk, except that the marionette was hungry, felt sorry for him, and, pulling 3 pears out of his pocket, offered them to him, saying, "These 3 pears were for my breakfast, but I give them to you gladly. Eat them and stop weeping. If you want me to eat them, please peel them for me. Peel them? Asked Geppetto, very much surprised. I should never have thought, dear boy of mine, that you were so dainty and fussy about your food. Very bad. In this world, even as children, we must accustom ourselves to eat of everything, for we never know what life may hold in store for us. You may be right, answered Pinocchio, but I will not eat the pears if they are not peeled. I don't like them. And good old Geppetto took out a knife, peeled the 3 pears, and put the skins in a row on the table. Pinocchio ate 1 pear in a twinkling and started to throw the core away, but Geppetto held his arm. Oh no, don't throw the core away. Everything in this world may be of some use. But the core I will not eat, cried Pinocchio. Who knows? Repeated Geppetto calmly, and later the 3 cores were placed on the table next to the skins. Pinocchio had eaten the 3 pears, or rather, he devoured them. Then he yawned deeply and wailed, I'm still hungry. But I have no more to give you. Really, nothing. I only have these 3 cores and these skins. Very well then, said Pinocchio. If there is nothing else, I'll eat them. At first he made a wry face, but one after another, the skins and the cores disappeared. Oh, now I feel fine, he said, after eating the last one. You see, observed Geppetto, that I was right when I told you that one must not be too fussy and too dainty about food. My dear, we never know what life may have in store for us. Chapter 8. Geppetto makes Pinocchio a new pair of feet and sells his coat to buy him an ABC book. The marionette, as soon as his hunger was appeased, started to grumble and cry that he wanted a new pair of feet. But Mastro Geppetto, in order to punish him for his mischief, let him alone the whole morning. After dinner, he said to him, Why should I make you feet over again, to see you run away from home once more? I promise you, answered the marionette, sobbing, that from now on I'll be good. Boys always promise that when they want something, said Geppetto. I promise to go to school every day, to study and to succeed. Boys will always sing that song when they want their own will. But I am not like other boys. I am better than all of them, and I always tell the truth. I promise you, Father, that I'll learn a trade, and I'll be the comfort and staff of your old age. Geppetto, though trying to look very stern, felt his eyes fill with tears, and his heart soften when he saw Pinocchio so unhappy. He said no more, but taking his tools and 2 pieces of wood, he set to work diligently. In less than an hour, the feet were finished. 2 slender, nimble little feet, strong and quick, modelled as if by an artist's hand. Close your eyes and sleep, Geppetto then said to the marionette. Pinocchio closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, while Geppetto stuck on the 2 feet with a bit of glue melted in an eggshell, doing his work so well that the joint could hardly be seen. As soon as the marionette felt his new feet, He gave one leap from the table and started to skip and jump around, as if he had lost his head from very joy. To show you how grateful I am to you, Father, I'll go to school now. But to go to school, I'll need a new suit of clothes. Geppetto did not have a penny in his pocket, so he made his son a little suit of flowered paper, a pair of shoes from the bark of a tree, and a tiny cap from a bit of dough. Pinocchio ran to look at himself in a bowl of water, and he felt so happy that he said proudly, "Now I look like a gentleman." "Truly," answered Geppetto, "but remember that fine clothes do not make the man unless they be neat and clean." "Very true," answered Pinocchio. "But in order to go to school, I still need something very important." "What is it, son?" "An ABC book." "To be sure, but how shall we get it?" "That's easy, Father. We'll go to a bookstore and buy it." "And the money?" "I have none." "Neither have I." Pinocchio, although a happy boy always, became sad and downcast at these words. When poverty shows itself, even mischievous boys understand what it means. "What does it matter after all?" cried Geppetto all at once, as he jumped up from his chair, putting on his old coat, full of darns and patches. He ran out of the house without another word. After a while he returned. In his hands he had the ABC book for his son, but the old coat was gone. The poor fellow was in his shirt sleeves, and the day was cold. "Where's your coat, Father?" "I have sold it, son." "Why did you sell your coat?" "I was too warm." Pinocchio understood the answer in a twinkling, and, unable to restrain his tears, he jumped on his father's neck and kissed him over and over again. Chapter 9. Pinocchio sells his ABC book to pay his way into the marionette theatre. See Pinocchio hurrying off to school with his new ABC book under his arm. As he walked along, his brain was busy planning hundreds of wonderful things, building hundreds of castles in the air. Talking to himself, he said, "In school today I'll learn to read, tomorrow to write, and the day after tomorrow I'll do arithmetic. Then, clever as I am, I can earn a lot of money. With the very first pennies I make, I'll buy Father a new coat. It shall be of gold and silver with diamond buttons. That poor man certainly deserves it, for, after all, isn't he in his shirt sleeves because he was good enough to buy a book for me? On this cold day, too. Fathers, indeed, are good to their children." As he talked to himself, he thought he heard sounds of pipes and drums coming from a distance. He stopped to listen. Those sounds came from a little street that led to a small village along the shore. What can that noise be? Oh, what a nuisance that I have to go to school, otherwise. There he stopped, very much puzzled. He felt he had to make up his mind for either one thing or another. Should he go to school, or should he follow the pipes? Today I'll follow the pipes, and tomorrow I'll go to school. There's always plenty of time to go to school, decided the little rascal at last, shrugging his shoulders. No sooner said than done. He started down the street, going like the wind. On he ran, and louder grew the sounds of the pipe and the drum. Suddenly he found himself in a large square, full of people standing in front of a little wooden building painted in brilliant colours. "What is that house?" Pinocchio asked a little boy near him. "Read the sign and you'll know." "I'd like to read, but somehow I can't today." "Oh, really? Then I'll read it to you. Know then that written in letters of fire I see the words Great Marionette Theatre." "When did the show start?" "It is starting now." "And how much does one pay to get in?" 4 pennies. Pinocchio, who was wild with curiosity to know what was going on inside, lost all his pride and said to the boy shamelessly, "Will you give me 4 pennies until tomorrow?" "I'd give them to you gladly," answered the other, poking fun at him, "but just now I can't give them to you." "For the price of 4 pennies, I'll sell you my coat." "If it rains, what shall I do with a coat of flowered paper? I could not take it off again." "Do you want to buy my shoes?" "They are only good enough to light a fire with." "What about my hat?" "A fine bargain indeed, a cap of dough. The mice might come and eat it from my head." Pinocchio was almost in tears. He was just about to make one last offer, but he lacked the courage to do so. He hesitated. He wondered. He could not make up his mind. At last he said, "Will you give me 4 pennies for the book?" "I am a boy, and I buy nothing from boys," said the little fellow with far more common sense than the marionette. "I'll give you 4 pennies for your ABC book," said a rag picker who stood by. Then and there the book changed hands. And to think that poor old Geppetto sat at home in his shirt sleeves, shivering with cold, having sold his coat to buy that little book for his son. Chapter 10. The marionettes recognize their brother Pinocchio and greet him with loud cheers, but the director, Fire Eater, happens along, and poor Pinocchio almost loses his life. Quick as a flash, Pinocchio disappeared into the marionette theatre, and then something happened which almost caused a riot. The curtain was up, and the performance had started. Harlequin and Pulcinella were reciting on the stage, and, as usual, they were threatening each other with sticks and blows. The theatre was full of people, enjoying the spectacle and laughing until they cried at the antics of the 2 marionettes. The play continued for a few minutes, and then, suddenly, without any warning, Harlequin stopped talking. Turning towards the audience, he pointed to the rear of the orchestra, yelling wildly at the same time. "Look, look, am I asleep or awake? Or do I really see Pinocchio there?" "Yes, yes, it is Pinocchio," screamed Pulcinella. It is," shrieked Signora Rosaura, peeking in from the side of the stage. "It is Pinocchio! It is Pinocchio!" yelled all the marionettes, pouring out of the wings. "It is our brother Pinocchio! Hurrah for Pinocchio!" "Pinocchio, come up to me," shouted Harlequin. "Come to the arms of your wooden brothers." At such a loving invitation, Pinocchio, with one leap from the back of the orchestra, found himself in the front rows. With another leap, he was on the stage. It is impossible to describe the shrieks of joy, the warm embraces, the knocks and the friendly greetings with which that strange company of dramatic actors and actresses received Pinocchio. It was a heart-rending spectacle, but the audience, seeing that the play had stopped, became angry and began to yell. "The play! The play! We want the play!" The yelling was of no use, for the marionettes, instead of going on with their act, made twice as much racket as before, and, lifting up Pinocchio on their shoulders, carried him around the stage in triumph. At that very moment, the director came out of his room. He had such a fearful appearance that one look at him would fill you with horror. His beard was as black as pitch, and so long that it reached from his chin down to his feet. His mouth was as wide as an oven, his teeth like yellow fangs, and his eyes two glowing red coals. In his huge hairy hands a long whip, made of green snakes and black cats' tails, twisted together, swished through the air in a dangerous way. At the unexpected apparition, no one dared even to breathe. One could almost hear a fly go by. Those poor marionettes, one and all, trembled like leaves in a storm. "Why have you brought excitement into my theatre?" the huge fellow asked Pinocchio, with the voice of an ogre suffering with a cold. "Believe me, your honour, the fault was not mine." "Enough, be quiet. I'll take care of you later." As soon as the play was over, the director went to the kitchen, where a fine big lamb was slowly turning on the spit. More wood was needed to finish cooking it. He called Harlequin and Porcina and said to them, "Bring that marionette to me. He looks as if he were made of well-seasoned wood. He'll make a fine fire for this spit." Harlequin hesitated. Then, frightened by a look from the master, they both left the kitchen to obey him. A few minutes later, they returned, carrying poor Pinocchio, who was wriggling and squirming like an eel and crying pitifully. "Father, save me. I don't want to die. I don't want to die."